as water security for sustainable development with equity. All the delegates, invitees, and exhibitors, I cordially invite you for the valedictory function of 7th India Water Week on Saturday, that is tomorrow, the 5th of November at 2:30 in Hall number 4. Shri Jagdeep Dhankar, Honorable Vice President of India, has kindly consented to preside the valedictory function. Invitation cards are available at outside halls 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D as well as in the exhibition venue. However, entry will continue with the badges provided by the organizers to delegates, invitees and exhibitors during conference. The time for technical session on 5th November has been preponed and we'll be beginning with the sessions at 9:30. For security reasons, the entry to the venue on 5th shall be from gate number 3. We'll be having a lot of dignitaries from Honorable Minister of State for Jal Shakti tomorrow will be present to grace the occasion. I invite all our delegates and exhibitors to please attend this valedictory function tomorrow. Now, we have our last technical session for today, a group discussion on river basin planning by our lead agency, World Bank. I invite our chair, Ms. Debashri Mukherjee. Debashri Mukherjee is presently the Special Secretary, Department of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation, Ministry of Jal Shakti. Previously, Debashri served as a Joint Secretary at the PM Office. Her earlier roles include CMD of Delhi Transportation Corporation, CEO of Delhi Jal Board and Secretary of Social Welfare and Children and Women Development, Government of Delhi. Debashri holds an MA in Linguistics and English from JNU and MSc in Water and Environmental Management from Lukebirg University. Can we have a huge round of applause for our chair, Debashri? Thank you so much. Now I invite Mr. Yoop as a co-chair. Yoop is a lead water resource management specialist at the World Bank. A civil engineer by training, Yoop works in the South Asia region, tasked with the preparation and review of water, irrigation, flood management and dam safety products in Bhutan, India, Nepal and Sri Lanka. He combines expertise in the development, rehabilitation, modernization and management of irrigation systems including dams and institution development of irrigation agencies and water users associations. Can we have a huge round of applause for Mr. Yoop? Thank you, our Chair Debashri and our co-chair Yoop for joining us for this session. I now invite our presenters, Ellie Berg, Lead Water Resource Specialist, World Bank, to please join us on the stage. Ellie Berg is a global lead for water resources at the World Bank. She leads the network of water resources professionals in the bank and quality enhancement of World Bank water resources work. She has led the World Bank's new global report on water shortage, calling for a new, more integrated approach to shortage management, which is being previewed at the COP in Egypt next week. Can we have a huge round of applause? I now invite Ms. Shelley McLean. Shelley McLean is a Senior Water Resource Management Specialist in the Sustainable Development Division. So Ms. Shelley McLean will be joining us online. She is a Senior Water Resources Management Specialist in the Sustainable Development Division for East Asia and Pacific of the World Bank Group. She will be joining us online. Now I invite Mr. Sunil Kumar to please come up on the stage. He is currently working as a Director, Basin Planning in Central Water Commissioner, which is an apex technical organization in the field of water resources sector under Ministry of Jal Shakti. He has a professional experience of over 23 years in the field of water project preparation, governance policy, basin planning, research and development, training and capacity building. May I now request Mr. N.K. Mathur. Ms. N.K. Mathur is a civil engineer and a water resources engineer by training. After his post-graduation from IIT Roorkee, he joined CWG in 1984 in the Central Water Engineering Group A service. and has since worked in various capacities such as hydrological observation, flood forecasting, monitoring and appraisal of projects. Now I invite Mr. Vivek Kapadia. Mr. Vivek Kapadia is at present working as a secretary to the government of Gujarat and deputed to Sardar Sarovar Narmada Nigam Limited as director. He has obtained Masters of Engineering, Masters of Law, postgraduate diploma in Business Administration and in Computer Applications. Thank you so much once again to all our distinguished speakers, our eminent chair and co-chair to be a part of this technical session. I now request our chair Debashri Mukherjee to please say a few words as opening remarks for our audience.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm aware this is a difficult session. The lag overs, so to speak. Not only is it a post-lunch session, it is also, the final session of the day. So I remind my co-panelists of the challenge of keeping everybody interested and engaged. That said, however, I think I don't need to emphasize the importance of integrated basin management and the processes that are required to ensure holistic water management. We are used to dealing with water in silos. We talk about surface water, we talk about groundwater, we talk about water for agriculture, we talk about drinking water and sanitation systems, and frequently we don't even talk about drinking water and sanitation systems together. So we have always treated water in silos. The issue of integrated basin management is very, very simple. Do we know how much water we have? Do we know where it comes from? Do we know how much we need? What are the requirements? What are the water demands? And frequently these water demands are competing. The water demands are also political. I remember, just anecdotally, when I was working in Goa, and Mr. Manohar Parrikar was the chief minister. And I was working on water, drinking water supply. And he had done brilliant work on creating bandaras and augmenting the available water, particularly during summer. So, but every day in summer, there had to be an instruction issued on whether the irrigation pump sets were to be switched on or switched off that day, depending on what kind of water we had to supply for drinking water. So I told him that we need to evolve an institution to decide this. It should not be the chief minister who decides every morning whether the irrigation pump sets are going to be switched on or not. So he told me, no, look, this is something that I want to do because it gets me political mileage. It's very clear about this. So we need to remember also when we are talking about basin management that water and allocating water across demands is intensely political. I think what we've done is, in India, we are at a very nascent stage. The National Mission for Clean Ganga has taken some baby steps towards looking at holistic management of a water basin. However, there again, I think groundwater is something that is not really factored in very well. There has been some work that the Central Water Commission has done with the support of external agencies in the Brahmani-Baitani Basin, am I correct? The Brahmani-Baitani Basin and also the Tapi Basin. I do know that the government of Karnataka has been working on the Tungabhadra sub-basin. So there's work being put in place on integrated basin level planning. The challenge is one, getting stakeholders together, but two, the challenge is also in the implementation. And the challenge is in the institutional structure to try and get the implementation done. The importance cannot be emphasized. And I hope today's deliberations will give us some kind of way forward. And we have a lot of international experience amongst our panelists today. So we hope that it will give us a way forward to look at basin level, sub-basin level water management in India. And there will be recommendations that we can take from this group that can inform policy. Thanks. I think.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Considering the time, and you want to say? No. So my suggestion is we go straight into the presentations, considering the time and the last session of the day, so that we can leave in time. And then after the 3 presentations, we will ask the panelists for their observations, and then we'll open it up for discussions. If that's okay,
sure.
Then we'll proceed like that. So then I want to introduce, I can introduce. So Eileen was co-chair this morning, also has done a presentation this morning on global practices for river basin planning. She will now go to the Nile Basin. I think the bank has been involved for many years in the Nile Basin Initiative, maybe 15 years, Eileen. So there's lots of experience, especially on how to deal with data, how the different countries, because these are not states, these are countries, but probably many of the same issues as we have with the states in India. So Eileen will talk for about 8 minutes, if possible, and then we have the next presentation on the Mekong, and then Mr. Kumar, and then we'll get into the panel. So Eileen, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary and Joop, for that great introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit today, and I think my presentation should be coming up soon, I hope, about the Nile Basin Initiative and bringing you examples from the Nile Basin where there is not an official legally mandated basin authority, to give you an idea of ways in which basin cooperation and basin planning can be advanced, even when there is not an official legal mandate. And despite the fact that this is an international river basin, I think there are many lessons that can be learned about cooperation that are very valid for a federal and state setting. So hopefully there's a presentation coming up soon. So just while we start, I can do some from memory. The Nile Basin covers 1/10 the land mass of Africa, has a population, I think, of roughly 400 million people, and covers 10 countries. There's no formal legal framework agreement, thank you, no formal framework agreement that covers the entire basin. There are some historical colonial agreements that cover the lower basin states, and there are some sub-basin agreements, but there's nothing that governs the entire basin. Just to give you an idea compared to the Ganga, it's about 3 times the length, covers about 3 times the basin area, but is about 1/20th of the flow. So it's an extremely long but dry river, and extremely important, especially as the 2 lower states get 90% of their water supply from the river. There's hardly any rain in Sudan and Egypt, so they rely entirely on the Nile. So in addition to the fact that it's such a dry environment, there's also expected to be major population growth along the river and increased development. And what you see here on the right is a picture of the night lights in the Nile Basin. And you can see the 2 basin maps match up. So there's a lot of electrification among the most northern, the most downstream portion in Egypt. But a lot of the rest of the basin is not well electrified at this point. It's not well developed, and there's expected to be a lot of development, agricultural, industry, as well as increased need for water across the sector and to meet the growing population. So an extremely volatile situation, considering that there's no overarching agreement. As Madame Debashiri said, this is an extremely hard session, so I'll try to keep this to as much storytelling as possible. In around 1996, 1998, the ministers of water were engaged in a very long process that's still ongoing today to try to develop an overarching legal agreement for the basin known as the Cooperative Framework Agreement. It has not been settled. Some states have signed on, some states haven't. It hasn't entered into force yet. But in parallel to this, many of the ministers of water came to the World Bank and other donors with a laundry list of investment projects that they wanted to undertake, but they couldn't agree on this list of investments. Some wanted some wanted the others. So the World Bank helped them in a process where they took a step back and agreed to a shared vision. To say, okay, while we're working out this overarching legal agreement, let's see what incremental agreements we can get in place in the meantime. So they agreed to a shared vision to achieve sustainable socioeconomic development through equitable utilization of and benefit from the common Nile Basin water resources. And they agreed to 2 programs of activities to undertake in the meantime. One was a shared vision program in which they set up networks of professionals in water-related areas to engage in cooperative research and projects. So they had one on environment where they were mapping critical ecosystems across the basin. One on regional power trade, where they got power engineers together from the 10 countries, and they embarked on a joint study that found if they cooperatively developed the power sector, there was no regional power pool at this point, if they cooperatively developed the power pool, they could save $6 billion over the coming 20 years. I want to tell you about one specific partnership that was called the Water Resources Planning and Management Partnership, in which the countries agreed to look at their policies at the national level to see how IWRM instruments could be improved, as well as looking at how they could establish a joint decision support system. They set up an NBI structure. They agreed to what's called the Nile Basin Initiative. It's a transitional structure that's intended to be replaced when finally a river basin institution is agreed to and the legal agreements come into force. It's governed by the Nile Council of Ministers, water ministers. It has a technical advisory committee, which is 2 technical representatives from each ministry, and then has a secretariat that's based in Uganda that implements the work for them. I think in retrospect, some would say that they wish that they had had a more extensive governance structure that went beyond water, given that water touches so many different sectors. But this was the agreed framework and governance framework that's still in place today. So they came together under the Water Resources Planning and Management Project and agreed to establish a joint decision support system. Each country agreed to nominate 2 technical modeling specialists, one paid for by the project, one sponsored by the ministries, that embarked on a very long process together. They agreed, they went through and reviewed and agreed a joint official data set for the basin. They developed the decision support system, which is a spine. If a lot of you were in the session just before lunch in room, I believe it was 2B, DHI gave a presentation on what this decision support system entails, but it was a spine that you could plug different models into, including the Mike suite of models. That was fully developed, and each country picked a use case, that they picked a basin challenge that they wanted to look at, and that's how the model was calibrated, based on a case from each country. Each country had their 2 representatives fully trained and also embarked in wider trainings. And it has resulted in a modeling system that's still in use today. It since has been expanded. It's available online. There have been various efforts to try to get more people using the DSS. In some countries, they just use the Mike tool. They don't actually plug it into the DSS. But in others, they are fully using the DSS. There's been a DSS user award contest to try to get the most innovative cases and uses of the DSS across the basin to put the tools into use for policy planning. One very important sort of outreach that was used for this was to look at in the involvement of universities and ministries. So different tools have been put into place around the different modeling efforts of the Nile Basin Initiative, including the establishment of a young professionals program, where young ministry officials, young professors are brought together at the Nile Basin Initiative to use the tools, the data, and do research. And this is really important, one, to give them access to the agreed data sets and models, but two, to have them working together, to develop an understanding of the basin and viewpoints beyond their nation state. So it's proven to be very successful. They're now implementing a shared hydromet system. They're developing a data analytics and services platform, giving better access to Earth observation data. They've branched out and are doing capacity building into dam safety. I apologize, I don't have time to go into detail, but if anyone's interested in learning more about this, happy to give you more detail. But the important takeaway is that despite having a legally mandated basin authority, they were able to come up with temporary agreements and inch along through joint research and joint capacity building to increase the cooperation across basin states. So thank you very much. Look forward to further discussions.
Thank you, Eileen. That was 8 minutes. Well done. Very interesting, Nile and Ganga. Lots of similarities, also lots of differences. I think Ganga has droughts, but also the floods, which you don't see so much in the dry part of the east. I think another difference is the development. There's so much development in the Ganga basin, which the one map you showed, the irrigation is really all in Egypt, right, in the delta, and a little bit patches. So, but I think the institutional setup, there are maybe some lessons to be learned. Madam, you talked about Ganga and baby steps. We've done a lot of pollution control now in the cities. Maybe the next Ganga should focus more on river basin management, e-flows, and there probably are some lessons to be learned from. So we will study that in more detail, I think. Thank you, Eileen. Our next speaker is Shelley McMillan. Shelley, are you online? Is she there?
Hi, Joop. Yes, I'm here.
Good afternoon, good evening in Bangkok.
Thank you.
Shelley will discuss the Mekong River Commission, another institution that was established maybe 20 years or longer ago. Again, she will focus in her presentation very much on the institutional development and also the complexities with a very large country upstream and then smaller countries downstream. So Shelley, if you can stay within 8-10 minutes, that would be good. I'm not sure you were here from the beginning. We have 3 presentations, and we have a panel of 2 esteemed specialists who will give some observation, and we'll open it up for the floor. So please, go ahead with your presentation, Shelley.
Okay, thanks so much, Joop, and hello to everyone. Distinguished speakers, guests, World Bank colleagues. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about the Mekong River Commission. And basically this first slide gives you a sense of the setup at the Mekong River Commission. So it consists of 3 permanent bodies: the MRC Council, the MRC Joint Committee, and the MRC Secretariat. The Mekong River Commission includes 4 member countries in the lower Mekong Basin: Cambodia, Lao PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam. The 2 upper riparians, China and Myanmar, are not members of the Mekong River Commission. The highest decision-making body in the MRC is the Council of Ministers, and they are the ones that really set the strategic direction and make all of the very, high-level decisions around what the agenda at the Mekong River Commission should be. Basically, there is a joint committee that sort of sits between the council and the secretariat, and that joint committee is the technical body, which really steers the implementation of the decisions made by the council. The secretariat, like all normal secretariats, is sort of the operational arm, and it executes all of the technical, facilitating, administrative functions, and so on, for the, the overarching MRC setup. They are responsible for providing advice with respect to joint planning, on coordination, on cooperation, and so on. The MRC Secretariat has national Mekong committees, which are basically their representation in each of the member countries. These national Mekong committees are sort of mapped to the line or the implementing ministries that are connected to the MRC. Most of them, if not all, I would say, are either water resources or environment ministries. And the chairperson of these national Mekong committees tends to be at the level of the Secretary General, and the members who comprise the committees are director level or deputy director level representation. In addition to this framework, there's also a donor consultative group, which consists of all of the development partners and other cooperating institutes that support the Mekong River Commission. And they have a summit of heads of government, which happens every 4 years. The first time they did it was in 2010. And that sort of is where they just take up any really very high level political decisions that need to happen at a head of state level. So just to talk a little bit more about the Secretariat, which, as I said, is really the heart of the Mekong River Commission, and the one that carries out all of the day-to-day and the actual work. They have 4 divisions and 1 office. I would say the key divisions are probably the planning division for the purposes of this discussion, where we want to talk a little bit more about river basin planning. And then the technical support division, which sort of, provides all of the information and the knowledge to then sort of feed into what the planning division does. In addition to those, they have, of course, an environmental management division. This has been a strong emphasis of the MRC since inception, I would say, which is to provide ongoing environmental monitoring of the Mekong River. The admin division does the usual things, manages human resources, finance, and other administrative support. And then, of course, you have the office of the Chief Executive Officer. The Chief Executive Officer position rotates every 3 years. It is currently held by Lao PDR. Prior to that was Cambodia. The next one will be Thailand. The staff of the Secretariat all come from the member countries, and they have about 60 in total, most of whom are in Lao PDR in the capital Vientiane, and some at the Regional Flood, Drought and Management Center in Phnom Penh. So how does MRC do basin planning? Well, there's a long history of basin planning at the MRC. I would say it even predates the MRC, to be honest, all the way back to 1957, when the Mekong Committee was established under the UN. At that time, they had already developed an indicative basin plan, which had major investments for hydropower development and irrigated agriculture. For those who don't know, the Mekong Committee fell apart when Cambodia pulled out because of political turmoil and other military and political instability in the region. And then later on, there was an interim Mekong Committee, and everybody came back together in 1995 to form the Mekong River Commission. So as you can see, from about 2001 all the way through to present time, the MRC has done basin level planning. The shape and form of that basin level planning, though, has changed over the years. So, their initial plans focused more on first sort of identifying and categorizing and so on the issues in the basin, as I said, with a strong focus on some of the environmental issues. Then they moved in more to some of the transboundary opportunities. And then they shifted from calling it basin planning to actually a basin development strategy in 2011, of which they prepared 2 iterations. And the most recent one, which is the 2021 one, actually extends beyond just the lower Mekong Basin. For the first time ever, it looks at the basin as a whole, because again, I think they try to improve every time and learn some lessons. And I think they realize that it's imperative for them to work at a basin scale. So this is my last slide. So just quickly, some of the areas for improvement. Some of you might be familiar with the Blue Peace Index. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo, not sure why. And, you know, this index, I think, is quite instructive and useful. It shows the strong points of 6 river basin organizations, but also some of their weaknesses. So here you can see the MRC, it really doesn't include all of the riparian countries, so that then causes some constraints. Even though they've done pretty good joint management planning, and I say dating back for many years, they still don't have neither water allocation mechanisms nor very clear dispute resolution mechanisms, which is a bit of a constraint. And the latest development is there's actually a sort of a new RBO, or another river basin organization entity in the Mekong, which is called the Lansang Mekong Corporation. And this has been, it's housed and promoted, I would say, by China. And this one includes all 6 riparian countries. So potentially, it is in a bit of conflict or rivalry with the Mekong River Commission. So I will stop there to allow the others to present, and I'm happy to take any questions during the discussion. Thank you, Joep.
Thank you, Shelley. Thanks so much. And hopefully you can stay online for a while, because we'll have a discussion afterwards. So again, lots of similarities. You need high-level involvement, the Council of Ministers. A lot of focus on environmental monitoring, which we discussed this morning also, is not very done, but over time will have to happen also. The other point we discussed this morning is if you have a river-based organization, get technical staff from the line agency, so you get more chance of buy-in rather than a separate, completely separate agency. So again, there are some similarities with what we discussed this morning. And Shelley, hopefully we can have a bit more discussion on the long-term engagement. It's been a long-term engagement, and it will continue at least for another 10 years. And I know also a lot of donor support, so no quick fixes, it does take time. So thank you, Shelley, for this interesting presentation. Then the last one, this morning, I don't know if you were there, sir, but there was a question on, do we have firm guidelines on river basin planning with technical recommendations? We both said no, so Eileen and I, you are going to present guidelines, CWC guidelines. Would be interesting how they look like and how it can support India, because as we said this morning, countries are different, countries also need different advice and different guidelines. So over to you, sir. 8 to 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Very good afternoon to all of you. I am from Central Water Commission, which was established way back in 1945 by the visionary leaders like Dr. Ambedkar and Dr. A.N. Khosla. And we have contributed immensely in development and management of water resources in the country. And we have developed numerous guidelines right from project preparation to the pricing of water resources, and you name it. So, and this guideline of integrated water resources development and management is one of them. I'd like to thank World Bank for being very instrumental and supportive in compilation of this guideline. I remember way back in February 2015, they have organized a workshop for deliberation of the same guideline. After that, it was approved by the ministry. So we have taken the same definition of integrated water resources management, which is widely accepted by United Nations and all the countries, which was given by Global Water Partnership. So I'll try to explain the definition graphically. So we have considered IWRM as the process which promotes coordinated development and management of water resources in order to maximize the social benefit and economic benefit in an equitable manner without compromising the sustainability of ecosystem. So this is a complete definition of integrated water resources management, which includes all pillars of IWRM which is needed. So we have considered the same definition in our guideline, which is widely accepted worldwide. Our water policy also includes all these contours of IWRM in various paragraphs. So it is very much in tune with our national objectives, the very concept or definition of the integrated water resources management. In the guideline itself, there are several important conditions which are required for implementation of integrated water resources management in the country. And the first of them is a comprehensive master plan, a basin level master plan. And there must be some scope for updation time to time based on the emerging challenges as and when appear on the way. We have given enough focus on the stakeholder participation in the entire process of evolution of IWRM process in the country, which is very important. Capacity building at all level. You might be knowing that in India, our socio-economic condition is very diverse, so we need to customize various capacity building training program as per the wide range of stakeholders. So the provision of the same is being given, flagged as the important condition for IWRM. We need enforceable legal framework. For example, we need certain further guidelines or a specific, area-specific, sectoral-specific, kind of either legislative tools or guidelines, or even the national water policy we have formulated with the objective that there will be a state water policy also on the basis of that. So by this legal framework, we mean that. We need water allocation plan, and here also there is enough scope has been kept for the emerging and upcoming demands, or even there are sectoral trade-off also. There is enough scope of the same left in the guideline. This is one of the most important aspect that we need. We need adequate investment. We need pricing of water appropriately by considering all principles of pricing, for example, affordability or meeting the operation and maintenance cost, and here also stakeholder participation in this process as well. So these are one of the very important conditions required for integrated water resources management. Definitely, we need to know our basin processes adequately, and we are running several study R&D programs to know our basin and hydrological process in the basin in a better manner, so that we can associate our demands accordingly. My colleagues from different parts of the world, from RTI International, he is also conducting a study of extended hydrological prediction. So these all sorts of study will facilitate to associate our demands according to the availability. So we are still exploring using the latest technology available to us. We need to monitor our various indicators in the river basin, so that we can again fine-tune all the businesses according to the availability of water resources. And as ma'am already flagged, that we need political will and commitment to implement all those technical findings and disseminate all the information for solving water related problems. Along with all these important conditions, the guideline, IWRM guideline, also defines the role of the river basin. There are various roles of the river basin organization. You might be knowing that there is already one act called River Board Act 1956, under which we can constitute river boards in order to manage in order to manage the water-related issues in a basin boundary. So this guideline includes the various roles of river basin organization, and not only important condition and role of the river basin organization. This guideline also includes exhaustive list of important direction, how we can go ahead with all those important conditions. For example, water availability and requirements, how we can assess, how we can associate the requirements, how we can go ahead with the water priorities. Although there is one elaborate paragraph in the National Water Policy that how we can prioritize our water resources, what should be the development of water resources project development with the time. So it includes all the directions required for adoption of integrated water resources management in the country. Further directions and how we can settle issues, very delicate issues like rehabilitation and resettlement. So exhaustive list of the processes and the directions included in this particular guideline. And lastly, I would like to say that a fully integrated approach to manage water resources at a river basin level may not be immediately possible, so as it is not possible anywhere in the world except Murray-Darling Basin and few other basins. Nowhere in the world it has been fully implemented, but definitely it does not prevent us to embarking upon the various aspects of IWRM at the river basin level. And under the visionary leadership of our ministry and our experts, we have already forayed into various aspects. We have already assessed water resources in scientific manner of all 20 basins, and we have further divided 20 basins into 150 sub-basins. So we have already done a lot of work in this direction of implementation IWRM, and we hope that few years down the line we will have full-fledged IWRM in place. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I like the conclusion, also what sort of linked to what the chair said at the beginning. We need to really start moving to holistic water management. From just a short presentation, these look very comprehensive guidelines, so very good. And states take notice. This should be compulsory reading. And as we said this morning also, the time is there. Business as usual is not going to do it. So I think this is an excellent starting point for states to move towards IWRM. So the guide is there. And maybe Eileen, in your discussion, you can, because you have seen many guidelines, maybe you can. Of course, we only saw a little bit, but I think it's very good. So these were the three speakers. So we focus on two large basins, and then moved to India, looked at the guidelines. So we have two esteemed panelists, Mr. Mathur and Mr. Kapadia, who we've asked to sit on the panel and give some initial observations, maybe be a bit provocative, give some tough questions to the panel. You can do that, sir, I know. And then we invite the panel to briefly respond, and then we'll open it up for questions from the floor. Mr. Mathur, you want to start? Yeah.
Thank you, sir. We had got three extremely nice presentations, and this integrated water resources management or water resources development and management, or whatever we are saying, has got an absolute consensus. Almost everybody related to it, whether he is thinking left or right or center, has always said that this is a wonderful concept, and this should be adopted. Still, as my friend Sunil said, this has been possible to implement only in Murray-Darling Basin as a model, which is very small and caters for a very small population. Rest of the experiences are developing, and we have seen two nice presentations about Nile and about this Mekong Basin, where it is being implemented in some magnitude or the other. However, in India, we have always been in forefront for integration and basin-wise development much earlier. We have got a functioning Bhakra Vyas Management Board having interlinking of Ravi Vyas, Vyas Satlaj, Satlaj Yamuna is of course planned, but inter-basin transfers, and then this inter-basin transfers extend to the area outside the basin also. It goes up to Rajasthan, and then we have got so many other organizations which have been functioning probably because of statutory requirement or because of tribunal, like Narmada Control Authority, like Tungabhadra Board, like this newly constructed, newly formed Godavari River Management Board, and Krishna River Management Board, Kaveri River Management Board, and we also had some excellent multi-state boards like Rajghat, which were there for the construction purpose of the project. And so we have got a huge potential for experimenting with the integrated river basin planning. Still, we have not been able to take even baby steps. So what is the problem? When there is so much consensus and so much potential, what are the problems? To me, the consensus itself is probably the problem. If there is a car which has got excellent engine, but it does not have good brakes, it cannot go with the speed. And so, we must objectively see what are the problems which we need to solve. Then only we can have a great instrument like IWRM functioning. So I will like to touch upon a few precautions. The first thing itself is the river basin. River basin is a physical concept. It has got a physical boundary. It has been created by God. It is it exists, unlike the state boundaries or district boundaries which we create. But we take it as a hydrological unit, and hydrological unit is based purely on the base of our limited, as Madam said, the silo basis, as we have said that this is based on surface water only. The groundwater does not follow the ridge line. We don't care about that. Then the utilization of water may be taken outside. We have already got Rajasthan Canal project. Sardar Sarovar is serving Rajasthan. And even in modern times, without even tribunal, Telugu Ganga project was constructed and supply was made to Chennai. And all those things are possible. So then there is, even if we limit it the hydrological planning and water planning, can we restrict it to the products? What happens to the products? The Punjab uses its entire water and produces the rice, but they don't eat rice. Rice comes to the rice eating states. Then there are hydropower generation in Uttarakhand, but hydropower generation in Uttarakhand is not done for the state. The state's requirement is very much less, and it is supplied to the whole nation. So the planning for this integrated water resources management as a hydrological unit is okay, but we have to think bigger than this. That is how it has been possible that we have got Rajasthan Canal project or the Sardar Sarovar project or all those things, because हमको बड़ा सोचना है, हमको बड़ा दिल रखना है और हमको सब लोगों का कैटर फॉर करना है. Then there are problems about large basins. Murray-Darling basin is a very small basin, but if you talk about Ganga, while Ganga is at spades at Patna, in Chittorgarh, we are at the same time we were facing drought, because upper Ganga behaves in different way, lower middle Ganga behaves in different way, and lower Ganga behaves in a different way. So, so problem of Chittorgarh, which is part of Ganga basin, cannot be integrated with the problems of Patna. So that reality we have to take into account. Then similarly, like say we say Godavari basin. Many times we talk that Godavari is a surplus basin and we should have a Godavari Krishna link. Fine, we should have. And Godavari is a surplus basin. But where is it surplus? It is surplus only after Sabri and Sileru joins to it. Upper Godavari is hugely deficit. Maharashtra portion above Python Dam suffers hugely because of deficit of Upper Godavari. And then if we plan according to the basin, we say it is surplus and we are exporting the water, or we are having the water, but the water cannot flow upwards. The water available downstream cannot be used by the upstream states, which are in deficit condition, and lower is in surplus condition. Then volumetric measurement is the backbone of integrated water resources management. You have to have a volumetric measurement system, and a person should be given, we should not say that you can sow so much rice and so much wheat. We should say you can have 6 cubic meter of water, and it's up to you that this 6 cubic meter of water you use for sowing grapes, or sowing this sugarcane, or a water economic crop. So volumetric measurement is a very big requirement for this integrated water resources management. But as soon as we say volumetric measurement, the whole irrigation lobby and farming lobby starts gets woke up, and they will start saying, "Arey, this is not possible in India. We are having this problem and that problem, and farmers will burn this thing and that thing." Why should farmers burn this thing and that thing? I don't say that you recover entire cost from farmer only. We have got the models where the companies are supplying the products like electricity. They are billing the product according to the regulated rates, and then the subsidies models and state intervention and planned interventions come, viability gaps, fundings, etc. come, and the ultimate consumer gets all the benefits which they are getting right now. So we can always plan the volumetric measurements and pricing in such a way that a farmer is billed for the actual water utilization, and if the actual water utilization is below a particular threshold, it can be made free. If it is between a threshold and another threshold, it can be at half rate, and if it is more than a particular threshold, then only he is billed for the entire thing. Then another important thing that comes about the management of the basin. The constitution provides only two types of things. One is union and another is state. But the basins go beyond the states. And not only that, a state has got multiple types of basins. A same state, Rajasthan, is surplus in Chambal basin, but is deficit in Luni basin. So how to manage all these things? So therefore, a basin administration has to be by the states, for the states, and of the states, with center's intervention as a handholding rather than governing. Thank you very much.
I have very simple few points based on the common sense, because water resource management is a product of common sense and not a rocket science. When we are talking of the holistic planning of the basin, I recollect a very epitomical statement from Marvin Minsky. Sum of parts of the whole is greater than the whole itself. And that is the beauty of the integrated water resource management. What Dr. A.N. Khosla was propagating an idea was this: let us rise from above the partisan interest of the states and work out for deriving maximum possible benefits out of the water in the national interest. And that was an epitomical message to India by Dr. A.N. Khosla in those days. And this is what we have to prove in the Indian context through water resource management in the integrated fashion, that is IWRM, or the basin level planning. India has everything. What India is missing is the institution. We people don't believe in the institutions. And that's why we are lacking in the holistic planning at the basin level. On the one hand, in all our policies, we say that water is a community resource. But do we hear anything from the community? Right from the minor canal level, let us ask ourselves, do we hear anything from the community? The answer is flat no. It is always a hierarchical decision making that we resort to. And that's why there is no participation of the community. At the most, we make the informed decisions, but not consultative decisions. And that's why institutions cannot sustain in this kind of atmosphere. Dialogue is the basis of institutions, and that's why we need to focus more and more on the dialogues. I'm giving you some live examples. In 2016, when there was a skirmish related to flood control in the Tapi Basin, only 2 states were involved, Maharashtra and Gujarat. We called a meeting in the presence of Chief Engineer of the Central Water Commission, who was sitting in Gandhinagar those days. I proposed only one point, that let us form a coordination committee between the 2 states for the flood control, not for the water sharing. It was basin level coordination committee, and right from 2016 till date, for the flood control purpose, the coordination committee is functioning, very well functioning. There is nothing kind of miscommunication, there is nothing kind of throwing barbs on each other. The same model has been replicated for the Narmada Basin, for the Sabarmati Basin, for the Mahi Basin. So different states can come together, but at the executive level, not at the political level, because executive machinery is much wiser than the political notes, is my bold statement. So let us assign these tasks to the executive level only. Basin level coordination committees, at least intra-state basins can be better managed by these kind of executive committees. And we can also unfold the same strategies for the interstate basin as well. Let us roll out first this thing. And then our experiments will show us the next step as to how to go forward. But if we don't put a baby step forward, we will never move ahead towards our goal. So we need to first put forth some baby steps. If you want me to formalize my experiences on these and put it in the form of a formal paper as to how we have resolved the issues with Maharashtra, with Madhya Pradesh, with Rajasthan, I can come out with this. But these kind of experiments from flood control to water sharing can be done. At least this committee can make an annual water balance sheet, which is today missing in this country. We don't have any balance sheet for any basin. If we come out with these kind of balance sheets, then also most of the things will be resolved, because transparency of the data is the basis of solution. Once these we have, then everything will be resolved in no time, I personally believe. So we need to come out with these kind of propositions, with these kind of baby steps ahead towards the solution. So finally, repeating again, institutions in the water sector are needed. We need to focus on institution formalization, their sustenance, and the problems will be sorted out very fast, I am sure, because all the countries have done like this. You take the example of Nile, or you take the example of Mekong, or you take the example of Colorado. They have sorted out their problems through institutions only. And institution is the only thing that can sort out all the problems of the water sector. Hierarchical model can never sort out the issues of the water sector. That is, I'm sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Any quick reactions from the speakers? Yeah.
Thank you, Joop, and thank you for all these fantastic comments. I can't agree more with the last speaker. If the first step isn't taken, you won't be progressing in the right direction. We talked about it in the second session today. River basin planning is a messy process. You never have enough information. Surfacing that you don't have enough information is part of the process, and that's how you advance. I have seen from the presentation of the guidelines, as well as from the presentations I've seen over the past 2 days, so much promise. I think the guidelines very well frame the advantages of IWRM and looking at sustainable development for generations to come. And I think that a lot of the information has been assembled already that's needed for the first step in basin planning, which is putting together the basin profile, looking at where a basin is today in terms of various indicators that matter to stakeholders, and the history, where the basin has come, what trends are there, and surfacing the preliminary questions, and then going to stakeholders to find out if you have captured the problems that they most see, from the community level on up to the major stakeholders. One thing, and as Joop said, I haven't read the guidelines in detail. I've read about them in various settings and saw the presentation. One thing that I think falls on the technical specialists in basin planning is to help find the solution space, right? You get the basin profile in place, you start the consultations, many problems will surface from lack of data to actual competition between different sectors, and it really it falls on the technical specialists to help carve out solution space. And I think you have great tools in progress towards that already, from looking at multi-purpose reservoir operations to solve flood problems. You're already developing the tools that are needed for basin processes. One area that may be an area of expansion, and it comes to the first respondent's point about groundwater. Even though the primary outline of the basin for planning purposes is the surface water basin, when there's not sufficient water there, groundwater resources are depleted, and that becomes part of the process that you're looking at. Given India's high rates of seasonal rainfall variability, much higher than other large economies in the world, and the low levels of per capita built storage, that groundwater and those aquifers, I think, are going to provide part of the solution going forward. That aquifer recharge will be yet another solution space that I think you've been, with the aquifer mapping that's ongoing, those solutions are going to start emerging too. So I'm very hopeful after seeing the past couple of days. I think there's a lot of promise and potential for basin planning here in India, and I really look forward to seeing what you come up with next, given the technical tools you've been developing.
Thank you. Let me open it up for questions from the audience. I don't know if there's a mic. Yeah. That question here, and then on the right. We'll take 3-4 questions, then yes, sir, and then in the back, and then the panel and the speakers can answer. Please go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My question is to Madam Secretary. My name is Kushagra. I run a business, and you are the probably only senior officer whom I find right from serving as a SDM in Delhi to handling the portfolio in MCD to Delhi Jal Board, and finally in the Ministry of Jal Shakti, along with the prestigious long list of other departments which you were in. My question is very simple and straight. I will elaborate it. I completely resonate with Aline in terms of data point and information. So the condition of Yamuna is not hidden with anybody as of now. We say that we are short of 650 MLD, and the sooner we install these STPs, the problem is going to be sorted, which is a completely out of picture thing. My question is, we don't know what is, it's a common sense, again I agree with Mr. Kapadia as well, it's a very common sense issue. We don't know during, if I take MCD, if I take Jal Board, I'm not going to elaborate on the drain systems of MCD or the duties of Delhi Jal Board or the irrigation department for that sake, from wherein all the drains are coming into the main Jal Board. I've been filing RTI since last 6 months. I've been talking to a lot of people. None of the RTI replies and none of the officers are able to tell me that what shit, that is a right word because that is shit, which is an irrigation drain, is going into Yamuna. We don't have a data point and information. We don't know the flow. We don't know any parameter of that shit. You can't stand next to our drains, be it Noida, be it Delhi. 18 drains of Delhi, 4 drains of Noida. You just can't stand near those drains, especially in the morning time. We don't have any data point. I can challenge any ministry by way of either verbally talking or filing through RTIs, even Central Pollution Control Board, which is not in the purview of Ministry of Jal Shakti. They are just assigning my RTIs to different department and different department and different department. So my question is, we don't know what are we transferring into a river. There are points near Delhi where you cannot identify which is a river and which is a drain. So a question again, a simple question is, why this activity has not been done yet? Because if we don't know, how will we solve it? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do, besides, next question there. And then in the back. Yes, sir, we'll come to you.
Good evening. My name is Yogendra Babu Sharma. River basin management plans are mostly based on short-term data. And in the process, we are considering at the most for past 200 years, or probably if historically, if you go further, another we add 500 years more, and mythologically, if we go then another 1,000 years, not looking at paleo scale. We don't know what is actually happening on mid-Holocene level, probably, but in the process, in the river basin management plans, we are trying to attempt reverse the damages which have been made by human activities. So we are actually trying to restore the ecosystem services, both provisioning and regulatory. And that is actually a very important and crucial part. And for that reason, this short-term data is not quite enough for the planning. And my summation is that we spent more on institutional mechanism, as Kapadia Saab said, that we emphasize more on institutional mechanisms to be adopted for those basin management plans. But I would say that we would rather see more structure and function of any river basins to look, to explore the ecosystem as a whole on a very longer scale. And right now, worldwide, if I say, few studies, if you look like Amazon or Mississippi or Niles even, or Thames or Rhines or Seine, they have given some new information when they embedded long-term data into their recent plans. So my suggestion is whether or not we can make it mandatory or we can possibly include long-term data in these plans. If it has not happened so far, at least in the forthcoming plans, we should make those essential, and that could give a better plan, a better decision, I think better management at river basin level. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One more question in the back there.
Hi, good evening. My name is Vijay. This is a question from the panel focusing on IWRM, that should we talk about the M part of it now before all agreeing on a single point of truth, that is one single point of data, both on supply side as well as demand side? Because I believe as a common understanding, which Kapadia sir rightly said, it's a common sense, that if we have a single point of truth of data, both supply and demand, probably half of the problems of stakeholders coming together will be solved. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Kumar, you want to start? Surprised so many questions about data. We had a whole session this morning on data, but good question. So Mr. Kumar, then maybe Shelley, and then Eileen.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I'd like to inform few things which is closely related to the questions asked. I'd like to say, address your point first. Actually, we have conducted a study on the basis of long-term data. So we have taken a window of 30 years from 1985 to 2015. So based on 30 years data, we have assessed the basin-wise water resources of the country. Not only that, we have also analyzed, based on certain projections of 2050, and we have analyzed the demand pattern on the per capita basis, and we have already, found that what are the basins, are going to meet the demands if our, current schemes are, keep on going of the water resource management. So we have already considered long-term data for our water resources assessment and for the planning. There is a document called by the National Commission for Integrated Water Resources Development, which is there in the public platform, Ministry's website, Central Water Commission website, where all the demands for 2050 have been assessed, right? And what should be the directions? And Ministry is already working on several recommendations given way back in 1999. So we have already rolled down several interventions in this direction.
Okay. The question on the Yamuna is a little out of syllabus, but I'll try. Now, we know what water is used in Delhi. Broadly, we have information. We know how much we extract from the Yamuna at Palla. So all the fresh water that comes in the river is extracted at Palla for the drinking water needs of the city. Beyond that, we also get water from the Ganga through a pipeline from UP. So we know, and we also extrapolate the amount of groundwater that is extracted. So sum total, this is the water that is going into for drinking water and other purposes, largely drinking water, because industrial water use is very, very low in Delhi. So yes, we know what is going in. We also, in terms of sewerage, we measure how much comes into the STPs and we measure how much goes out. The Delhi Jal Board does that. We do know also that 40% of Delhi is unsewered. And the wastewater from those colonies go into the drains. But that is overall accounted for in the water supply of Delhi. One of the strategies, which was supposed to be completed by 2016, but has been delayed because of contractual issues, is the interceptor sewer system, which was supposed to intercept the water that goes into the drains before it flows into the Yamuna. So the interceptor sewers were supposed to intercept the water, treat it, and then discharge into the Yamuna. Now, that said, my latest information is that this project should be completed. However, it is also true that these sewage treatment plants, a large number of STPs of Delhi, treat water at 3050, not at 1010, which are current standards. And I understand that they're being upgraded to treat at 1010. With the best will in the world, with water being treated at 1010, with all the wastewater being intercepted, we still will not have water at bathing quality in the Yamuna, and let me be very clear about this, without dilution water, which is where this entire issue of integrated water resource management, making water available for ecosystems comes in. Now, in the Ganga, the NMCG has set up certain norms for e-flows. But this is a process of negotiation. In Yamuna, we have not, particularly for this 22-kilometer stretch, we have no water for environment, no fresh water for environmental flows. And it's a trade-off between drinking water for the city and e-flows. Not easy. I've tried to answer this, but the rest of it, maybe we can take offline.
Shelley, would you like to respond to any of the questions? You think the Mekong is complicated. Talk about the Ganga. Not sure if she's still there. Eileen, you want to go? And then Mr. Eileen first, and then you, and then we'll close the session. Then maybe your closing remarks.
Thanks. And if I understood the question about data, it's whether we can, if we haven't agreed on one piece of data, how can we do a basin planning process? And I think, again, I return to this point that basin planning is messy. It's not meant to have complete agreement on every piece of data. The point is to get the information out there and to get the discussions started so that you know the problems that are being faced in the basin. You may never have agreement on all the different pieces of data, but the point is to progress to identify major issues that can be tackled together and to begin addressing those. And in most of these water resources management situations, at some points you just have to agree to disagree and move on and focus on the things where you can get progress, focus on the major actions. So again, I would encourage starting the process, opening up the data and information and analysis that's been collected to others so that they can criticize it, so that they can come in and say this doesn't reflect what I'm seeing, so that it can then be improved and better management decisions can be based on it. Thanks.
Yeah, actually Mr. Sharma's question is good enough and has a lot of bearing on the today's state of basin that we are talking about. I don't underestimate the significance of what he has been asking. But with due respect to his question, I would like to add that these kind of studies, that how the basin was looking 2,000 years back, 5,000 years back, 10,000 years back, means the Halcyon day basis analysis. It is technically called Halcyon day basis analysis. These kind of analysis are also required to be carried out. But in the given situation, we are in so much constrained a situation that we are looking forward to implementing a nearby solution. And that's why these questions, or rather this kind of long-term database, is not actually envisaged as a ready reckoner tool to us. But yes, certainly after rolling out our plan of the river basin level planning, the balance sheet that I am talking of will be having some kind of reconciliation with the Halcyon days database. So we shall certainly need it. We should focus on it, and we should not underestimate the concern that you have expressed over here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we are at the end of this session. Madam Chair will give her key takeaways and some closing remarks, and then we'll wish you happy evening, and then we'll see you tomorrow again. Madam, over to you. Final comments.
Thank you, everybody, for a very rewarding session. I think I'll just mention 3 points that I'm taking away from this session. And the first is, as Mr. Kapadia said, and as a lot of people have said, institutions. What kind of institutions can take forward river basin, can take forward integrated water resource management? I think I'm going beyond river basin management. I'm going to talk about integrated water resource management. What kind of institutions? And they may not be a one-size-fits-all. Maybe for the Ganga Basin, we already have NMCG in existence. How can we strengthen that? How can we redefine their role? So if there's agreement already, can we sort of, pick 2 or 3 categories of institutions and look at how these can take the IWRM agenda forward? That is one. The second point that I think for me that came through was, and this came from both the Nile River as well as the Mekong initiatives, is the question of incentives. Now, in both cases, there was a certain amount of resources involved that spurred cooperation and collaboration. So can we align some incentives with these institutional structures? And the third point that again struck me as we were having this discussion is that, we're never going to get perfect IWRM. We're not even sure what that is. So can we have some, interim indicators to show us that we are making progress? So in terms of, this, we've gotten here because we've done the plan, but in terms of implementation, this cooperation is happening. This is what has happened, and this has led to improvement. So can we upfront for each process of cooperation or collaboration,